Hello and welcome to Sugar, Silk and Stretch, a unique boxing podcast brought to you exclusively by Ace Podcast Nation. I'm not sure what's happened to those two reprobates right now, but I wasn't going to hang around and keep you guys waiting. So let's hope that one or both of them turns up as we go. Is that pick of Billy Fox? Yes, it is in the Bronx Bull. There you go. That's exactly what it is, Joe. It is because I thought because there wasn't a huge weekend of boxing that has just elapsed. The story that interested me most was the Kane Baker Akib Fayez fight on the undercard of Felix Cash Tyler Denny, sorry, getting pulled at the 11th hour because of irregular betting activity and various rumours of some kind of fix and betting coup and whatnot. And I thought, as well as addressing that, such as it is, insofar as I'm aware of that particular story and what I've heard so far, it might be fun to do a show which is entirely devoted to the history of skullduggery, rumors, fixes, and scams in boxing history. So just let's say hello to a few people: Ellen Bromson, Joe, Sean, Graham. Anybody else who's tuned in, make yourself known. Danny Graham as well. Um, Great podcast on Friday. He says that was me, Silk, and Isham Pickering, wasn't it? Brown Sugar. Yeah, it was always a pleasure to talk to Isham Pickering. It was a very good fighter and just a great guy. Great guy. Sid Bogle in the house as well. So here's hey, I've got a guest. I don't know which one it is yet. Let's see who's in here. Let's look in the RAM window. Here it is, and he's got a. Here we go. What up?
Hey, what's going on?
I'm changing the layout, motherfucker. Hang on. There we go. So you're not
Why
the
do I
only
have
person who
to
can
be
play
the
around
mother?
with the caption, the blue
Why
caption.
do
You
I
see,
have to be
so
the the fucker of mothers?
your sound doesn't. Your audio's not great.
My audio is not great. What if you turn
It,
your volume on?
nah, it sounds like you're in a house of some sort. Like,
Sounds
oh, I've
kind
got
of.
my volume's up, Silk.
Okay, hold on.
Tell me what you think of Silk's audio, people.
How is this? Is that better?
It sounds like you're in a tunnel,
In a
and
tunnel.
now I'm echoing back to you. That's,
Okay, hold on one second. Uh,
it was an inside job. See, you've got terrible echo, Silk. Sort it out, man.
okay, how's that?
It's not good. Do
How's
you want to
that?
try again? I don't know what it is you're doing, but you're doing something wrong that you don't normally do.
How's this?
Terrible.
How's that?
It's awful. It's Silk has to lift his face up.
I just hope it's better. Is this not better?
Super silent, super silent. Which has its charm, don't get me wrong, but
How's this?
it's awful. Do you want to come in again and try?
How's this?
Awful.
Okay, wait. I'm trying things out. Hold on. How's this?
It's terrible.
And that's terrible.
Silk is a brilliant boxer and a terrible techie. That's what I'm saying, Sean. It's like working with, I don't know, like animals and stuff. I'm thinking, but will the monkey know how to say his line? Sorry, I can't say that, can I? Because that may have bad connotations, which I totally didn't mean. But
Yeah. Okay.
try logging out, Silk. Maybe might help, and then coming back in because you're normally okay. You normally sound is all right.
This time I'm on my phone. Hold on. Lights mode.
Soft and muffled. This is not.
Okay, hold on. How's that? Wait. How's that? No, how's that?
Nothing is changing, man.
I can't believe it. I don't know why it isn't changing. Hold on. Microphone models are currently unavailable. Oh, microphone models. Oh, it won't be available. That's crazy. Where's Gary today?
Gary isn't here right now. I spoke to him earlier, but we're gonna have to sort something about your whatever it is, your audio, because I'm echoing back like an MFer as well, and you're just not coming through at all. Still very bad. We just need to sort it, man, because
Okay, but do I look good?
it's not even soft or muffled. I can't hear everything as such. And I'm echoing back to you. Whatever you're doing, it's obviously not what you normally do. Can you just do what you always do?
I'm not on my laptop. My laptop is not working.
Okay, so you can't do it on the phone, obviously.
Yes,
Um,
I'm trying to do this on the phone, but I'm just trying to see. Like,
well, maybe.
I don't understand why this isn't giving me.
Yeah, I know mine's okay, Sarge. Mine's always okay. But I'm echoing back to you. That shouldn't be happening, man. Try logging out and coming back in. It might solve everything.
Okay.
Probably hemorrhaging viewers right now.
Am I logged out right now?
Are you not going to try the logging out thing? You don't think that's going to help?
Log out. I thought I was logged out.
No, you're not logged out. You're so. Why don't I get rid of you and then you can come back? Because I can actually make that happen. Hang on. There we go. Sorry about that, guys. See, it's not too much to ask, is it? Just a little bit of professionalism. I mean, I get the fact you fought Tommy Hearns and Iran Barclay, and the other guy fought Chris Eubank, and I didn't. But does that mean I'm the only one who's got to pay any attention whatsoever to things, to how things look and sound on this show? You know what I mean? They think just being handsome and former world class boxers is enough. It's not enough. Here we go. Let me see if see how he is now.
Is that better?
No, it's not better at all.
Oh man. Looks like you might have to do this one on your own. Let me just check it.
Yeah, I don't know if it helped. Have you got any headphones?
No.
No. Yeah, now you're muted. Now you're muted, totally muted.
Okay, so that's not better. Okay.
Yeah, he's already signed out once. Have you never gone on the phone before?
I've never gone to this before. But I don't understand why it would be so different.
Nah, it's. Listen, guys, let me kind of get a thread going while he's trying to sort that out because far from helping me riff on the subject of fixes and scandals in boxing, it's actually just a complete distraction. Could he call you up and you put Silk on the speaker? Put your foot down, Sugar, and take control, says Danny. They should just know what they're doing, really. I can go on a laptop or a phone and I know what I'm doing. We're trying to play in the big league here, and we're trying to build this from a small phenomenon, underground phenomenon, into a big powerhouse of a social media platform. And in order to do that, we need everybody to be on board. Everybody should be rowing on this ship. That's what we need. Right. As I say, it's not a problem at all, Ben. Don't worry. No, it's okay, Sean. I guess part of the charm is that it's a little rough and ready sometimes, and we get these little things. Silk usually goes on a laptop, and clearly he doesn't have that working this time. Right, guys. So the thing that people are saying, they pulled the Fayez Baker fight from the undercard of Cash versus Denny last night because there was a irregular betting activity, is what it was described as. And Eddie Hearn said he heard certain things and he acted accordingly. He said to the board, "I think we should pull the fight." They agreed. He spoke to the gambling commission, and he said then, now it's down to the board to make their investigation. But the crux of it, so far as I can tell, is that there seem to be rumours of people betting on Kane Baker, who lost their previous fight 4 years ago. Kane Baker, I wouldn't call him a journeyman, but he has 11 losses out of 30 professional fights. And people were saying that it was perhaps going to be his last fight. He was going to hang up the gloves after this. And he was looking to make a few quid by having people on his team bet on a certain round. He would have been the underdog anyway, having been less the prospect of the two and having lost the previous fight. And he. There was round betting rumours that they were looking, because you wouldn't make a lot of money betting on Kane Baker to lose. He would have been the betting underdog anyway. But as anybody who gambles regularly on boxing knows, you can always make money by picking a round. If you nail the round, it's like getting the number at roulette. So it doesn't even matter if you've got a big underdog. If you bet the exact round they get stopped in, then you can make some dough. So the accusation such as it was, or the rumor such as they were, centered around the idea that Kane Baker's team were trying to stage a betting coup by betting on their man to take a dive in a certain round. But Kane Baker has made some volatile statements on, I believe it's Twitter, and if it's not Twitter, it'll be Instagram. But he's made some volatile statements on social media in which he says that it was the other side that were trying to get him to take a dive in a certain round. And he said, here comes the silk here, and he has said that they were not going, the fight wasn't going to happen unless he took a dive. Okay, so how are we doing this time, Silk?
I know, you tell me.
It's still very quiet. Am I echoing? Yeah, I'm still echoing. I don't understand because I'm on a phone too. I don't understand what you're doing that is different to what anybody else is doing. Or, you know, that what I'm doing. Because I have perfect sound. I've got a laptop, but I find the iPhone 15 Pro Max is actually better than the MacBook. That's why I use it.
Yeah, there may be some button I'm missing. I don't know.
I swear you've used your phone before.
No, I've never used my phone.
What is it?
It's an iPhone.
Right.
It's like this year's model, or no, last
So what
year.
have you done with your volume settings? What volume set? Because loads of people use phones for this kind of thing. Can you just repeat the accusations in the fix, Ben? Sorry, missed a bit. So basically, the rumor, the predominance of the rumor was that Kane Baker or his team and members of his team were betting on him to go down in a certain round, so he was going to take a dive. But Kane Baker has flipped that accusation to the opposing team, which is Akib Fayez, if that's how you pronounce his name, saying that they were looking to make money and stage a betting coup. He said it's the other side that were trying to do it, and he said something like there was money or a bribe offered to him at his hotel. He's trying to suggest that there was actually people approached him in some way and tried to bribe him to take a dive. That's what he said. And he said, I'm a professional. I've never done that in my fucking life. And to be fair, he's not exactly a journeyman. If you've got 19 wins out of 30 fights and you've a couple of times in your career, if you put 3 wins in a row together, then as far as I'm concerned, you are not a journeyman. You are a jobbing fighter, maybe. You may not be one of the fancy guys. You might not be the A side. You might not be super talented and well connected, but you are a guy who comes to win. If you can win 3 fights in a row, more than one occasion in a spell in your career, and you have more wins and losses, then you're not a journeyman in my lexicon of boxing. So he says, I'm a professional, I'm a real fighter, I've never taken a fucking dive in my life, never not come to win. So he's affronted. But either way, Eddie Hearn obviously heard certain things to do with irregular betting activity, and he spoke to the Gambling Commission, he spoke to the British Boxing Board of Control, and consequently he decided to pull the fight. And this is what we've been left with. What Sid Bogle says, Mark Heffron recently lost in Canada to Christian McBill in 30 seconds. That looked very, very suspicious to me. He also needs to speak louder and he will get through it. That's Alan talking about the Silk's problem. I think the Silk is, because he's just in that black screen there, I think he's working on this round the clock to see if he can rescue the audio. You got to give it to him. He is a fighter and he is a pro in that sense, because it looks like to me the Silk is still labouring behind the scenes to try and get himself with a decent audio track. So, as far as that goes, it's interesting, Sid, to talk about recent and ancient historical cases whereby, the fix, or there's been an element of manipulation in results of professional boxing. Because the way normally when people say to me, the average person on the street who might not be a boxing fan, and they say, "Oh, I think it's all fixed. I reckon it's all rigged." Or some people believe everything is fixed. Like they think that all major league sports are fixed, but it doesn't tend to be too much of an enlightened, intelligent view. But what I always say is, professional boxing, is fixed in a less. It's not fixed in a manner. Usually, it's not fixed in the manner of a kind of Guy Ritchie plot. It's normally an unspoken understanding that journeymen, certainly at the grassroots level in the UK, the industry, the building blocks for the industry and for the prospects who are actually hopefully going somewhere and will win major titles one day, perhaps some of them, the guys they fight on the way up are not coming to beat them a lot of the time. Sometimes you will get a rare case of a journeyman winning a fight and upsetting the apple cart, but most journeymen, to begin with, they are not ambitious anymore, and they tend to have a safety first approach. And also, sometimes there are blatant cases where they could have beaten a certain young whippersnapper, and they simply choose not to. That sounds like that echo again, Silk. Fair play. You've got to give it to him. The man's a trier. I don't get it though, because honestly, like I say, I don't have any problems with my phone at all. Why should? Because I've noticed even with your laptop, it echoes back a bit sometimes. You've got a silent thing in the background that shouldn't be there. So I'm trying to think, what are you doing? You're not listening to this at the same time somehow, are you? You must be, otherwise I wouldn't be echoing back.
You're not echoing.
I am echoing back when you come on, which means you must be listening to the show in some format somehow.
Yeah, I hear you. Yes,
Huh?
I hear you.
I know you do, but because I'm echoing, that means this show must be playing simultaneously in your house somewhere on a something else.
Well, my volume, my Bluetooth is turned off, so I don't see how that happens.
I don't know. I just know that it's too faint and I'm echoing back.
All right, well, maybe we have to leave this.
Yeah, you've tried everything. Sometimes headphones help, Silk, but
Yeah, my headphones are Apple product, and maybe their phones are good, but their headphones are garbage. I have two, and they both went on the fritz.
yeah, I mean, I'm afraid that audio is just
Yeah,
it's not letting your Delphic wisdom come through in anything like an acceptable form.
all right, no
All
problem.
right, well, I'll try. I'll hold this one, and then let's we'll see you next week.
See you then.
1 second. Sorry about that, guys, but that was fucked, wasn't it? It does frustrate me people's tech issues because I don't know. It seems simple enough, but I got to be honest. I used to be a complete tech idiot. It took me a very long time to have an email address, and it took me a even longer time to have a mobile phone. It is a shame, but he's struggling so much. Sid, he just can't seem to get the technical act together this week. What is What did Sean say for later? What do you make of Liam Cameron versus Arthur? I was surprised to see Boxing News did not carry any coverage of the fight at all. What, there was no preview, Sean? Was there no preview at all? I'm just wondering why that would have been, because they come out on Thursday now, Boxing News, right? Boxing News comes out on a Thursday, so surely they could have. Do you know what? Maybe they go to press too quickly. To come out on Thursday, they might have to go to press. They still know about the fight, though, wouldn't they? They could preview it several days before, so I don't get that. Got to be honest with you, Sean. I don't read Boxing News anymore, and I haven't done for a very long time. I suspect that's one issue. I always felt like I would like to write for Boxing News, and I would like to at least get one article published in there to tick the box. But I think one of the issues with me and them is that I don't read Boxing News, and they're aware that I don't read it. So I guess it doesn't make me seem like I'm really loyal to the cause anymore. But what I was going to say, we were talking about boxing and the way. To be honest with you, boxing is fixed and rigged. Professional boxing, that is, insofar as the journeymen who serve as the building blocks to a young prospect's career to fatten up the left-hand side of his record. Then you also have the decisions which seem to be veer towards the bigger commercial animal. Whether you think it's blatant corruption, or whether you think it's just gentle kind of favoritism, whatever you happen to think it is, or whether you think whatever you think that sorry, I'm looking at Sean's comment at the same time about Elliot Warsell, but so you have corruption insofar as you have the sheer number of controversial decisions, and the fact that journeymen are not trying to win most of the time. Don't get me wrong; sometimes they do. I think a guy like Johnny Greaves was very honest when he said, a lot of the time, he said you couldn't beat the kid anyway. It's not like you're moving all these kids around and you're carrying them, and you could beat them if only the game was fair and above board. He says some of these kids are really good. They're fitter than you. They're stronger than you. They're younger than you. They're better schooled than you. They've got a better amateur pedigree than you. Here comes the Silk again, I think. I was going to see what he's doing this time. What's up, Silk?
Yeah, I should have the earphones now.
Yeah, could you be a bit louder?
Is this echoing?
It seems the same as before, but
Okay, hold on 1 second. Go ahead, continue what you're saying.
so what was I just saying? What was I just saying? I want to read this Elliot Russell comment while I'm thinking about it. The likes of Elliot, well, you'd be far too honest for it these days. See, I mean, people say Elliot Russell is a really good writer, and he does seem to be a pretty good writer. I know people speaking high. Silk. People give him high praise, Elliot Russell, but I must admit, to me, I stopped reading boxing news when my page, Facebook page really took off because to me it felt like the whole landscape had shifted. And I know there was at one point a lot of people who used to read boxing news religiously stopped reading it, and a few people started to say they would rather take part in a Facebook page which had interesting content every day and you could engage with and have debates. That was became more important to them in the way that they ingested boxing news than it was to wait for a magazine, a paper based magazine, to come out every month. So I stopped when things really took off for me with Facebook content creating, chiefly on Facebook. It's always been my major favorite platform for boxing reportage and discussion. That's when I stopped reading boxing news because it just didn't seem as important anymore. But I still think it's a really great institution, and I do think it's the Bible of British boxing. And I would like to get a piece in there. Just I've not given up that ambition yet, but it's just whenever I tried to approach them with anything, it never seemed to come to any fruition for whatever reason. So what can you say? But what are people saying here? Your Facebook is far more responsive and interactive than BN and newsworthy. Yeah, I mean, see, that's what I think. For me, just the world has changed, Sean, and I've ran with it. That it's as simple as that. Just you made that comment about a highly suited prospect with connections. I think that's what you said. I get a little concerned about my friend Lewis Oakford getting shafted against John Hedges. Yeah, I mean, is Lewis Oakford one of Matt Hurst's fighters, Sarge? Because what I was saying was Johnny Greaves a few years ago in like an interview with either Boxing News or Boxing Monthly, he said that he said usually you've got an idea in the first minute or so whether you've got half a chance or not, and he says from then because they're clever and they people who've been in the ring a lot of times, hundreds of times, or scores of times, they tend to know how to gauge someone's power without actually taking a punch from them full on. So let me see. The Silk is not giving up. He's dogged. How are we this time?
I think we're good now. Are we good?
We are good now. See, fair play. You considering, I've got to say, I've said it before, but considering the fact we're not exactly getting banknotes thrown at us yet, you and Gary are very, very committed to this endeavour. But
Let me see. Where are we at?
why
Okay,
have
let
you?
me get
Yeah,
my.
what you get? I was going to say, can you get that thing out of the way, whatever the hell it is? But
It
see
was my
that now
mug.
your volume is perfect. So let's just go straight in without making a deal of it, Silk. I was
Okay.
saying that I'll bring you up to speed with it. There was a fight that was supposed to happen on the undercard of a show last night, high profile-ish show, but the sort of show that wouldn't be on your radar. The kind of show that if we suggested betting on it or doing a prediction, you'd be like, no, it's not globally important enough. And why should I be looking up these guys when really it's not? It's just not big enough to be transatlantically interesting, right? It was one of
Mm-hmm.
those shows last night. Okay, now, it
Uh-huh.
wasn't the main event that got pulled at the 11th hour. It was one of the fights, like an 8 rounder, I think it was. And they fought previously, these two guys, 4 years ago. There was a load of rumours, from what I can gather, that one of the guys was going to take a dive in a certain round and there'd been some irregular betting activity. So Eddie Hearn heard this and he pulled the fight. He said he spoke to the border control and said, right, it's not happening. I've heard a few worrying things. There's been some red flags. And from that, I started talking about the industry and how common that kind of thing is in my experience. And what I was telling the viewers, as far as I'm concerned, in my experience, that is pretty rare, that actual kind of thing. That's more movie-esque kind of syndrome, because the way in which boxing tends to be rigged as an industry tends to be more subtle and more prosaic than that, with the whole load of journeymen you have in the UK, certainly, with the bad decisions and the corruption in that sense. But you don't normally see something as blatant as a betting coup, do you?
Yeah, no, I think it's kind of rare. If you're a promoter and you have a good matchmaker, That's how you fix a fight.
That's how you fix it. Thank you. Exactly that.
You have a good matchmaker, and the matchmaker says, okay, I know this guy can beat that guy because they, whatever it is, they talk to people, they see the matchup. So it isn't necessarily just even the record, for instance, because you can get somebody who has a bad record that's going to be a stinker and make your guy look bad. The matchmaker's job is to make the main event, the main guy, look good. The money kid,
Yeah.
the A side, has to look good. So if if the promoter has got a great matchmaker and they'll suit their product, they'll match him up with their product well, and he'll look great all the way through. It's when you don't have that choice anymore. That's why when fights get to the top, the upper echelon, that's why when fights get there, and then there's no matchmaker involved. There's no matchmaker. It's like these two
Well,
guys are great fighters. They're both great. They're
there
talented. I
shouldn't
don't know
be.
who's gonna win, but everything else has a way of, like, the fix is the matchmaker. Basically,
But
that's it.
like you say, there shouldn't be matchmaking when you hit the top. That's because I think it should be the luxury of the developing fighter,
Yeah,
and that's
exactly.
absolutely
There
fair
shouldn't be
enough.
match. Yeah, there
And
should be a matchmaker.
some of that art should not just be to protect him and make him look good. There should be a calculated risk to make him a better fighter if you're truly doing a good job, and you have to juggle the two priorities, right? If
Yeah.
you're doing it really well.
Uh huh.
Otherwise you create a guy who's getting a paper mache contender who's getting set up for a fall, right? When he gets let off
Yep.
the leash. So, and I'm the same as you. Basically, once you're a world champion, I know the term has been devalued absolutely in this era, but once you've hit that supposed pinnacle, you shouldn't be looking at cherry
Yeah.
picking and so you don't have
Well,
to have a
the training wheels are off. Basically, the training wheels are
exactly.
off, and it's time
But
to ride the bike.
But we see it today, don't we? Where we see people who supposedly hit the top who are still acting with that safety first matchmaking kind of
Yeah.
ethos,
Yeah.
and some people justify it. I mean, I remember Barry Hearn was talking about
But
some
I
of
but I
the
think that's because they're looking for that mega fight. You know what I mean? They don't take anyone that's risky enough to bump them off or make them look so bad, so they can't have that super fight. And that's
true,
unfortunate too.
but sometimes they don't even want the super fight. They just want to live in their lane of world championship recognition, and they think there's room enough for all of us, and they don't want to fight that other guy until they're both on their last legs. Sometimes in this day and age,
Hmm.
but um, but regardless, I wanted to talk, having established the way that the industry tends to be on both sides of the Atlantic. I know there's going to be a little differentiation between the UK and the US, but a lot of similarities as well. What I wanted to talk about is the history of the more blatant skullduggery in the sport, and how many occasions we could isolate. I mean, obviously, I don't know if you noticed, but the thumbnail I used for this on YouTube was Billy Fox versus Jake LaMotta, which is a fight that's long since LaMotta admitted
Yeah.
to not taking a dive in because he wouldn't go on the floor, would he? But he
Yeah.
lost. He was passive and he ate punches until the referee stepped in, and that
Uh-huh.
was because the cartel that controlled boxing in those days, like Frankie Carbo and Blinky Palermo et al. They basically said, if you do this for us, then we'll get a title shot against Marcel Sedan. And you know what Lamotta said, by the way? He said it actually cost him money, that title shot too. He had to pay him
Mhm.
something silly like 20 grand. I think it was 20 grand, Silk. But bear in mind this was in 1950.
Yeah.
He
It's
said he
significant
had to
money.
give him 20 grand to fight for the title as well. Can you imagine
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. No, and that's one of the things that's really makes it so difficult to judge the abilities of fighters in yesteryear. Things like that. We see the gallant side, we see the fighters, and we say, okay, these guys are for real, but we don't see the underpinning, the under, that layer below, that undercurrent,
Well,
and it's
yeah,
usually a bad undercurrent.
yeah. And Ray Robinson was somebody notoriously that the mob couldn't get to play ball with them. Well, I say they couldn't get him to play ball. He would play ball, but all he would
Yes.
do, the best he would offer them was he'd carry somebody if they wanted him to carry someone 10 rounds. And you could see some of Robinson's fights, including that one I make a big fuss of, the Bobby Dykes one, where he was probably carrying that guy on the night. And that's why he was dancing and doing some of that stuff he didn't normally do, because
Yeah.
he was actually had agreed perhaps to carry him.
Yeah.
But funny story. He fought a guy called Al Netlow in 1942 in Philadelphia, and he
Hmm.
was supposed to carry this guy for 10 rounds. Yeah, and
Hmm.
Netlow stung Robinson with a big right hand. I think it was the third round, and he
Yeah.
just got pissed off and
Yeah.
reflexively he's chopped him with a big,
Yeah.
Sugar Ray
Hmm.
Robinson style left slash in left hook, and
Yeah.
he's knocked the fella out. And they're like, oh fuck. And then he knew he was going to have to talk to Blinky Palermo. So,
Yeah.
he goes down to a newsstand where Palermo was known to hold court. And apparently, Palermo took a sanguine view of the situation and he said, "It's all right, Ray, and nothing we can do about it now." And that was the
Yeah.
end of
Yeah.
it. But
Wow.
but
Wow. I
Robinson
would.
had some protection, clearly. Robinson had some, I think he had some Afro Caribbean or Afro American protection.
Yeah.
Some people say it was Bumpy Johnson, right? But other
Yeah.
people tell me Bumpy Johnson was like a bit player and he wouldn't have had any real leverage with the Italian mob. They say he's been
Yeah.
romanticized in The
Yeah.
Godfather of Harlem. But
Yeah.
somebody had. Harry Wiley Jr. wouldn't tell me, but he said there's a reason why Robinson had his leverage with the mob and couldn't just be leveraged by them.
Yeah. I certainly wouldn't know. That's for sure. But obviously, I think there almost any fighter had representation in those days. I mean, even when you hear about guys that didn't want to get involved with the mob at some point because they were almost the athletic commission, weren't they?
Yeah, basically, I mean, because guys like Frankie
Yeah.
Carbo, they called him Mr. Grey, and he was the
Yeah.
absolute czar of boxing then.
Yeah.
And because these guys didn't have a clean enough record to actually be managers of record, they used to
Hmm.
get puppets in to manage their
Yes.
fighters. And you know,
Exactly.
you probably heard about a really controversial decision, Billy Graham and Kid Gavilan back in the day.
Yes.
Supposedly, when the Carbo asked for a meeting with Graham's manager, and he basically said to him, 20%, and you can have the title. You've got the title. Give me 20% of Graham, Billy Graham. And he said, "Well, I'm going to talk to." He said, "No, we don't do things that way." And he said, "Well, go talk to Graham. He gets the final say." And the
Hmm.
fighter said the same thing. "No, fuck it. I'm not giving him 20% to him. I'm not going to betray my manager either." So
Yeah.
he said, "Listen, he ain't going to win. Doesn't he realize that?" He said, "That kid's got a lot to learn." And then it was a real controversial decision. Everybody think the legend is that Graham won the fight, but Gavilan got the decision.
Yeah.
Um, so certainly in those days, that it was absolutely right. I want to go back a little further, Michael, as well, because I feel I've got to. We could almost get into any conversation and segue, but I feel
Yeah.
like delivering with some bullet points on the show that we
Yeah.
advertised. Ketchel versus Johnson. They said that, which was in 1909. They said that that was supposed to just be an easy move around, and I think Johnson was gonna carry Ketchel at least and let him go the distance. But then he said Ketchel double crossed him and knocked him over in that 12th round. So then Jack got up, didn't he, and hit him with a devastating uppercut, which apparently knocked out a bunch of Ketchel's teeth. So they say.
Man.
And you
Man.
see that picture of him where he's like a starfish on the canvas, and Jack's in those really old school beach shorts, leaning back against the ropes, like thinking
Yeah.
that's what happens when you want to play with me.
Yeah.
But they said
Yeah.
it was. They said that the fix was in to an extent, or the arrangement was in,
Yeah.
and
Well, those guys,
Ketchel.
they played for real, right? Like the mob played for real. And anytime you double cross, I don't even know that if you don't even double cross them, you do not go into an agreement with them. I don't know what kind of repercussions there. I mean, they wouldn't do nothing, right?
Well, here we go. Because Sarge has just said, was it partly due to because Sugar Ray Robinson was sensationally brilliant that the mob just backed off, and so to speak? No, it wasn't. That
Yeah.
people have said that. That's been suggested by a few people. Tell me
Yeah.
where that works in reality. Oh,
Yeah.
they thought, oh no, but he's such an artist, man. I just can't bring myself to kneecap him with a lead pipe. It just
Yeah.
wouldn't be
Yeah.
right. Because have you seen the way he triples that left hook? You
Yeah.
can't. I mean, we would be like that if we were gangsters. That would be our value base,
Yeah.
which is why we'd never make gangsters.
Yeah, right. It's like, oh shucks, okay, let
Even
him
though,
go.
even though my name this week is quite gangsterish, if you see there,
Oh, I didn't see. Let me see. Oh, Suge White. I
yeah,
like
because
that.
that you gave me that.
That's right.
But
Suge White. I
so
like that.
obviously, I think that would be a fascinating story that's still yet to be uncovered. Why Ray Robinson could roll with the mob and was untouchable by them? Because Carbo used to say, "You're a great fighter, Robinson. If only somebody could just talk to you."
Hmm.
And that's what he kept
Yeah,
saying. That what it's a shame that you. So he must have had some insurance. He just simply had to have. He
yeah,
got a title shot in the ballpark, and I got a one-way ticket to Palookaville. I think you recognise that
yeah,
line
yeah.
from
Oh,
Sid
yeah.
Boggle.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, you must have some backup. You know what I mean? Absolutely. Some protection of some sort. So I think everyone at some point had to have been connected. Is it really interesting? Like Jack Johnson's story is so interesting to me in that, like, I his irreverence, like to the powers that be at that time. I mean, they weren't just. I mean, they were cops and they were corporate guys, and You know what I mean? The
Yeah.
social mayors and whatever it is, and he was just so
He rode pretty
devil
roughshod.
may care. Yeah, exactly, by himself, and I can't even
Doesn't
understand.
make sense, does it?
Yeah, it doesn't make sense to me how he even lasted that long. I would think
Well,
he
do you
would
know
be
what?
gone.
I
Yeah.
know a few historians
Uh-huh.
whose knowledge is they've got a very formidable knowledge base on that particular period, and they say Johnson has the most twisted, romanticized legacy going. They said he got nicked because he was guilty of that Mann Act. He was running hookers and mistreating women. He was running prostitutes, and that's why he got nicked for running prostitutes. The Mann Act, not because he was going trying to cross a state line with his sweetheart and his fiance who happened to be white, and like some kind of groundbreaking, standard challenging love story. He said no, he was running
Well,
horse,
that may have been the only reason he was able to do it. The fact that he was running, uh, a certain type of woman across the borders, and it wasn't,
Yeah,
a homebody woman kind of thing. They were professional women, so they were kind of like whatever. And the ones that
yeah,
were paying for the professional women were probably other business owners, managers, corporate guys, legal guys. You know what I
yeah,
mean? He's
yeah.
he's probably running them across back and forth the border to them, not
Because
necessarily.
what these people tell me, these historians, it's only their view, but I do set a lot of store by what they say. If anybody wants to check them out on Facebook, I'm talking about Buddy Gibbs is really good on this. Also, Douglas Kavanagh, Doug Cav is good, and for his sins, Steve Compton. I know Steve Compton is a little bit charmless and a little bit brusque, and he did tell my esteemed colleague Michael Elijah to stay in his lane one time because they were arguing. He was saying Pernell Whitaker. If you analyse Pernell Whitaker in a chest tube, he's not actually that good. And Silk basically politely said, "Fuck off! If you can't see Pernell Whitaker as a genius, then you shouldn't even be talking about boxing. You should literally be gagged." And that you weren't even anywhere near that strong, but that's kind of what you meant, right? Right?
More or less, yeah.
And he was trying to explain why you wouldn't know anything about it anyway, because all you were a middleweight contender in a certain era who wasn't
Yeah,
all that. But
yeah,
but Steve Compton is knowledgeable about history, and they all say that Johnson. What they say is that black fighters. Of the period didn't like him because they felt he was messing everything up for them and
sure.
ruining their opportunities. He was
Yeah,
a red rag to a bull.
yeah,
They said that
yeah.
they actually were not particularly unpopular. They were doing well, and guys fought
But
for a world title
come on.
before.
Like Joe Lewis couldn't. No one could fight for a title after Jack Johnson for like what 25, 50
Yeah,
years or
it
something.
was
That's
it was
crazy.
from 1915 to 1937, and you may know this. Johnson was always trying to get his mitts on Lewis. Lewis. He was
Yeah,
always trying to get in to Lewis's camp, and they wouldn't
yeah,
let him anywhere near him. They
yeah,
said, and Lewis. So in the end, Johnson would pal up to whoever Lewis was fighting, like
yeah,
Braddock. It might be
yeah,
Canera, it might
yeah,
be
yeah,
Bear,
yeah,
and
yeah,
Schmeling.
yeah.
I think he had something to do
Uh-huh,
with, and he encouraged
uh-huh.
him to throw the right hand at him.
Hmm.
And in his autobiography, Lewis says no one likes a sore ass loser, and that's what Johnson was. He said that.
Yeah. Well, I also remember Lewis was kind of like. I mean, he was the reason why he was able to fight for the title is because they made him sign papers that more or less said you're not going to be, abrasive, aggressive, do all of those,
That was his black management who said that. It wasn't the white establishment. It was the black management who said, "Don't take a picture with a white woman ever. Do not gloat over a white opponent." You see, when Lewis has won a fight, he's only lifting one arm, isn't he? The referee's lifting
Yeah,
one arm.
no, he
He's
was.
not even
Yeah,
lifting his other arm.
he was always like he always repressed it. He always seemed like he repressed his true spirit.
And
Like he never really.
yeah,
Yes.
he had
Go ahead.
affairs with people like Mae West, and they just completely covered all of that up.
Yeah.
He was banging white starlets too. Why wouldn't
Oh,
he be?
sure. Yeah.
You know,
Well, I have a funny story. A good friend of mine. Oh, he's passed away now. Um, he had a story with Mae West, and I don't know
yeah,
if I can.
really.
I don't know if I can say it here. Yeah, but it was hilarious. It was
And it was to
hilarious.
do. It was of the carnal nature. Yes,
It was the carnal nature and Mae West. Okay, so quickly, let me see if I can do this without going too get too dirty with it.
it all
So
went south. You get it?
the mouth went south.
Yeah,
So let me get
exactly.
let me get to
We're just too
that.
good.
So he used to be her go like her gopher, I guess, and he used to do all
Yeah.
sorts of things. And one day she said to him, "Well, hello, boy," that voice she used to have. And she said, "Have you ever had a gum job before?" And he didn't even know what that meant. And so she took out her teeth and did what gum
Yeah.
jobs were meant to do. And he
Do the
said it
things that
was the
lovers do.
he said it was the greatest thing he'd ever experienced. It was so hilarious. Like he blew my mind. It was just so funny the way he told
He's like, have you ever had a gum job off an old Hollywood
it.
starlet?
Exactly.
Legend, A-lister.
Off May West. Could you
Because you
imagine?
haven't lived otherwise, son. See, what
What
other
is it?
show? You find me another boxing podcast where you can hear that kind of anecdote just plucked out of nowhere. We will wait. We'll wait. Quite
I mean,
frankly,
May West. I mean, that's like I sometimes. I mean, I was just at the time where I was here. I was born in the '60s, so I would have heard of her, I guess, but very minimal. But I mean, she was like Marilyn Monroe of that day.
she was absolutely huge. So Joe Lewis, like you say, it was all just kept out of the paper that he had this
Yeah.
very humble demeanor. So you could
Yes.
say, do we fully know who Joe Lewis
No.
was?
Absolutely not.
Because
No.
his personality was
Yeah.
on the down low. It was on
Yeah.
lock.
Yes.
And as well, he said when he said that thing when he got drafted into the army, which is
Uh huh.
obviously a diametric opposite route that Ali took when the time came with the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
He was supposed to say, he said, America will always win because we're on God's side. And what he
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
supposed to say, the person who wrote it for him, he said, it's going to be America will always win because God's on our side, which kind of makes
Yeah.
more sense. But there's something a bit more poetic about the juxtaposition that he accidentally came out with. So when the guy said, Joe, you said it wrong, you were supposed to say God's on our side, he said, no, I said it right. And it went down in history, that he
But
said,
wait.
we're
So
on
how
God's
did?
side.
Oh, we're on God's side.
That's the way
Wow.
he said it, and that's what.
Yeah.
And in a way, that is actually more poetic, just because you're not supposed to say it that way. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
So he was like,
You.
"No, I got it right, mate. Don't you worry about that."
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Yeah. You could tell Joe is. I mean, he's obviously thoughtful. He was a lot more things than what we give him credit for. I'm sure he was outspoken. He was strong in his own way, but he did hold his tongue a lot too for a lot of things that.
And yet, him and Robinson got certain things done behind the scenes, like they
Yeah.
made sure that they integrated camps in the World War Two.
Exactly. Yeah.
You
I
know.
mean, yeah. I mean, and they paid for it too. I mean, it's crazy the way Joe was taxed by the government for. I mean, wow. Like you think
You
about
know
his
what?
personal.
I hate to be this mythbuster who's always taking the
Yeah.
up, but then you'll understand that because you're very devil's advocate and everything. I've heard as well that that's been overplayed, that narrative, and that it was his fault that he messed up badly and his business advisor messed up badly,
Oh
and in
yeah.
the end the government called it quits and let him off. People say that yes, he was in trouble, but some people say Uncle Sam didn't hound him as mercilessly as people say, and that he actually made a total pig's ear of his own finances, and then because
Yeah.
he ended up in a pretty sorry state. He was hanging out with a hooker who was shooting heroin into his buttocks, and he was paranoid, and he thought people were trying to get in through the pipes and stuff in hotel
Yeah. Yeah.
rooms and
Uh
through
huh.
the radiators and stuff.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Well, I understand that he lived out his final days in Las Vegas doing the
Yeah.
greeter thing, and he was set up by the mob. Obviously, they saw him as, somebody who's they gave him an opportunity, and that's all you want. You know what I mean? They gave him a chance to live like the rest of his years out and do what he knows how to do, and the only thing he could do. And they paid him for that, or they took care of him for that. They gave him a place there. Of course, he had to shake hands, but there's a harder way to go, and there's a lot of
There
guys I
is.
know that went a very, very hard way.
They gave him a few bucks to play the tables and stuff. There's a funny story
Exactly.
in his autobiography, where I can't remember the name of the other sports person who he was confused with, but so I'm going to insert a name to make the anecdote work. But basically, some old lady said, "Oh my God, you're my favorite sports star. Can I have your autograph?"
Uh,
And he's about to sign, and then suddenly she says something like, "Don Lettsfield, you're my favorite baseball player." And Joe Lewis is too polite and too nice a guy to actually say, "Well, that's not me. I'm the great Joe Lewis. Are you kidding me?"
yeah,
So he just goes along with it. So he's about
yeah,
to sign it. Then he mutters to his friend, "How do you spell Don Lettsfield?" and he
yeah.
wrote it, and he wrote it for who she thought he was.
Yeah, yeah,
Which
yeah. I think that every living organism has its defensive capacity. You know what I mean? Has the ability to protect itself, and I think Joe had that, obviously. his physicality. Like, you have another side. You see if somebody and they're always smiling and they're always happy and all the rest of that kind of stuff. They do have the aggressiveness within them to defend themselves, given that opportunity. Every single living organism has to have that, otherwise it doesn't survive, right? It has
Yeah,
to have the ability to protect itself, and I think that's, Joe is very, he appeared to be very docile and thoughtful and observant, and in that way, I think that served him well, especially given the times that he was coming up, because people weren't. They just had one loudmouth, and then they have Joe Louis, and then they're about to go to another loudmouth in
yeah.
Cassius Clay
It,
Muhammad Ali. You know what I mean?
and at one point there was that tension between Lewis and Ali, because Ali would make some critical statements of Joe Lewis
Yeah,
being an
yeah,
Uncle Tom, and
yeah.
etc.
Well, it's
etc.
you watch at the end of the fight, at the end of the Liston fight, and it's wild when they're doing the interview in the ring, and they have Joe Louis, they have a whole crowd of people, they have Muhammad Ali, and they have the announcer, and Ali is just crowing, just going
Stream
off.
of consciousness and
Yeah,
ignoring Joe.
yeah, I'm the greatest of all time. I'm the prettiest. I'm this, that, and the other. And
I'm a
he's
bad
stroking his
man.
face. I'm a bad man. And he knows Joe Louis wants to tell him something. And he knows Joe Louis wants to talk. And he knows that the announcer wants to, but Ali is not giving him anything.
Do you
It's
know
just
what?
that whole show, what Ali did there was just to shut Joe Louis up, just
Do you
to
know
put him in
what?
his place.
I remember in my lost years when I was hanging out in a band and drinking and just partying and stuff, I would still make all my bandmates watch boxing and classic was such videos as we had at the time before
Uh-huh,
YouTube.
uh-huh.
And I was showing them one of my favorite heavyweight documentaries called Kings of the Ring. And it
Yeah,
shows you that speech and that thing you just described. Because initially they
yeah,
say, "Get up there, Joe, get up
yeah,
there, Joe." And he's
yeah,
supposed to do his bit. And he's literally
yeah,
ignoring him. And
yeah,
I'm
absolutely.
trying to explain the enormity and the disrespect and cocksure confidence that
Yes.
adds up to all in one.
Yeah.
And I said to try and explain it to you, I said I used to box a little bit, right? I
Uh-huh.
said to him, now even if I just um, beaten Fernando Vargas with both hands down by my sides in a round, and I downed a bottle of Jack Daniels in the corner beforehand, there's no way I could ignore someone of the enormity of, let's say, Muhammad Ali or Sugar Ray Leonard. That would be
Yeah.
and I just
Yeah.
ignore him during my victory speech. I just could not
Yeah.
possibly do that. But
Yeah.
that's what he did, and
Yeah. Yeah.
but supposedly Ali, looked after Lewis in some ways, and
Oh
would
yeah.
buy him
I
winter
believe I
coats and
believe
stuff.
that. Yeah. No, Ali, I don't think is one to hold a grudge, but at that moment there was things that Joe said about Ali, maybe
Well,
continuing to call him Clay, not recognizing his chosen
brilliance.
religion now,
He's
and yeah, and his brilliance too, and his ability, and and sure, Ali tested him too, because Ali was like, "I'd whoop that dude," but he did talk pleasantly about Joe Louis as well. But
yeah,
you're dealing with egos, and both of them have. Joe had as healthy an ego as Ali did. That's for
for
sure.
sure. And he actually said in his autobiography, which was actually written in the 70s, that Jimmy Braddock would have beat Ali, which is just blasphemy, really. It's actually, I think I got it right here. Let me
Yeah.
see. Yeah, it's actually in this book right here. You see that? That's the
Yeah.
Joe Lewis
Uh-huh.
autobiography.
Wow.
And at the back of this book, it says that he doesn't think he could have handled Braddock, and it's like he's lucky I didn't burn the
Wow.
damn thing, But but all right, let's talk about probably the most iconic rumor of a fix, I would say, unless you think there's a bigger one. Clay, it was Ali Liston too.
Two. Yeah.
And the first one too. Some people talk about the
Hmm.
first one, Silk, but the
Yeah.
the second one is the one where you really have that
Stood
scope
out.
for
Yeah.
conspiracy theory.
Yeah. I'm trying to think like if there were anything else. I mean,
Do you
I
subscribe to the view that was hooky, that fight? You think it was totally kosher?
I think with someone of Liston's temperament, anything could be possible. Like
Yeah.
it could be fixed without Ali even knowing. Like, you know what I
Oh,
mean?
I don't
I,
think he would have known a thing about it, Silk.
yeah, yeah. I mean, so Sonny may have decided to take a dive. Like his guys say, listen, you're not gonna beat this kid. You're gonna go out there and you're gonna we're gonna put odds on something crazy, like you getting knocked out in the first round, and we
Yeah.
can collect everything on it. You know what I mean? And so he goes out there and he takes a few shots and that one shot was a great shot. Like
Yeah.
I don't think it can be denied.
But
That
what
shot that
yeah,
Ali hit. You
very
see it.
quick.
You see it go through the back of Liston's head.
And
Like
you
you
know
just
what?
see the impact.
he caught him with another big shot before that as well, which was
Yeah,
actually had a big impact. People who
yeah,
saw it live said, who were
yeah,
ringside, said that was actually a big punch he landed
yeah,
maybe 10 seconds before the finish.
yeah.
But what
And
I think is what I
there's
think
that
is
trauma.
Sonny didn't try to get up. Oh, he stayed
Yeah,
down
he
deliberately.
probably could have
I was
got
not
up
very
and
convincing.
yeah,
You know,
he overacted like rolling around and stuff like that and trying to get up. But
that
I
was
think
Todd,
that
right?
yeah,
That
yeah,
was bad
yeah,
acting.
that looks like bad acting to me. And then Ali was doing like the histrionics too. So between those two things, it may look like, you know what I mean? It looks bad. It looks bad because here's a guy rolling around on the ground. It looks like he could get up. And then here's a guy who's jumping around saying, get up. And he's jumping around and trying to throw distractions, you would think. You know what I mean? They
Yeah.
look like they're distractions from Listen, who's rolling around on the ground. Some people are going to say, yeah, that's the proof of it. But you know, it, maybe it's just the perfect, imperfect storm.
Yeah, one thing's for sure is I can't look at that picture and just enjoy it, even though it's a fantastic photograph, because I always
Yeah.
think about all the
Yeah.
baggage is attached to it. But one guy we could get on the show sometime and would be interesting is Paul Gallagher, who is Sonny Liston's most credible, most kind of anorak biographer, who's probably
Right.
is probably the leading, most knowledgeable authority in the world on the subject of Sonny Liston, and he
Hmm.
thinks both fights are fixed. Obviously, he's not the only one to say those things, but
Yeah.
he will tell you both fights were fixed, but then he tells you some amazing stuff that Liston's family were kidnapped in the
Yeah.
run up. He says were
Yeah.
kidnapped in the run up to the second fight. There was a fella called Ash Resnick who was close to Sonny, who's
Ash
obviously Sonny
Resnick.
was
Yeah.
mobbed up to his eyeballs, and some people suggested there was a betting coup going on in the first fight. I personally reject that. I think in the first fight, Liston was trying to win absolutely, and he fought a kid who was much better than he realised, was stronger than
Hmm.
he realised, and could punch harder than he realised as well. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Ali had seen so much, and he was so young, but he had experienced so much in terms of different styles. Liston's beaten. Obviously, he'd beaten good fighters and overpowered them, and he had skills of his own. But the matchup was all wrong. The matchup
Yeah.
was absolutely all wrong. He'd never dealt. He'd never seen. How do you train for something like Muhammad Ali at that point? Like in
I also don't
1960.
think people were watching him properly, Silk, even though he had the amateur pedigree and they must have been able to see some of his fight in the Olympics or something. And because he'd been struggled with Doug Jones and then he'd been decked by Henry Cooper and you had the
Yeah.
controversy there,
Hmm.
I think they weren't looking properly at what they needed to look at in
Yeah.
terms of
Yeah. Yeah,
uh,
he's just a loudmouth kid. He
yeah,
talks a lot. Sure, he's fast. He's gonna run
good
all over the
amateur,
place.
but he ain't got it
Yeah,
for the pros.
yeah, yeah. You're gonna catch up to him. Just cut the ring off, and and it's gonna be different. But
He'll swallow
you
it,
know,
yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Because maybe it was actually it was part of it was part of the probably global consciousness then that if you talk loud then you were not really any good at what you did and you
yeah,
weren't really brave because you were only doing it because you were scared, and
yeah,
maybe Ali actually called that whole way of thinking into question on a historical level. He was big enough for. Because if anybody spoke about that now, saying the empty vessel, the
yeah,
loudest vessel is the emptiest, the first
yeah,
thing you could always say, anywhere in the world could say, what about Muhammad Ali? Couldn't they? And
yeah,
that and
yeah,
that puts
yeah,
a spanner in the whole
yeah.
theory, doesn't it?
Yeah,
You
it
know,
really
so
does. Yeah, I mean, Ali was somebody like given to the histrionics, and he really, I almost think in the first fight he supercharged himself into that win. Like he actually by his boasting and some would say bragging, but his it's not even confidence. Like he took fear out of it by bringing it to life. Like he talked it to life. Like he made it happen himself.
manifesting, yeah.
Yeah, just by the repetition of like seeing it, saying it, doing it, seeing it, saying it, doing it, and saying it out loud. He really just made it happen. He almost like he was like hypnotizing himself
Hypnotize
and bringing
himself, yeah,
yeah
for sure.
yeah and a lot of fighters would learn from that. They could absolutely learn from that because I know there are times you go in and you don't know really what you're going to do to overcome it, but you're like, I know I'm going to win, but you don't know. You have to say it, and you have to say it, and you have to repeat it, and it was actually a master class in psychology what Ali did for himself there. And even
Yeah.
when he got to the point where at the weigh-in or the press conference when he was just like,
Tell him I'm
the
here with Sugar
vitriol,
Ray.
yeah, Yeah, and he was just, you know what I mean? We're both the prettiest and all the rest of that kind of stuff. But he doesn't see it any other way. He cannot, like, he maybe at one point saw himself as losing, but he said it so many times that it was gone by that point. So the ability, like, self-hypnosis is one of the greatest things you can do. Like, to, to I think that was so commendable. Like, a fighter's psyche is fragile. Every fighter's psyche is fragile. Anything can happen on the way to a fight, and that one thing that happens can take you right out.
Yeah.
And you don't look at it as, something that can make you better. You make it as, it's always seen as something. Oh my God, I can't believe that happened. And everything that happens is bad. Ali was always, very confident, very, no matter what it is, yeah, he'll paint it into a positive picture for him.
And yeah, and I think that's why there was something godlike about him, even though he would have rejected that description for obvious reasons.
Sure.
And I think whatever age you might be, as a child following him, or even as an adult following him, there's something so robust about Ali's heroism. It makes you feel like as long as you stay close to that,
Yeah.
faithful to that, you can jump over walls as well.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
He's because
Yeah.
don't get me wrong, Silk. Even though Sugar Ray Leonard is, but I always say my favourite two fighters are Ali and Sugar Ray Leonard, and I can't separate them. But what I
Hmm.
will say is Ali is a bigger, more substantial hero to me outside the ring
Yeah.
than Ray could be, even with the best will
Yeah.
in the world. I
Yes.
really like Ray, what he did inside the ropes,
Yeah.
and I think he's a
Yeah.
cool guy. But
Yeah.
Ali, in terms of iconography, is on just such another level. And
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't know if there's a fighter that could touch anything, even an athlete, and even, I don't know, politicians or religious individuals that can touch the intent of Ali, like what he's done and what he's tried to do over time, like empowering people,
yeah,
empowering
this
empowering the poor from every single race on every part of the country. You
there's a
know,
few things I want to get to because there's three interesting points here that I do want to deal
yeah.
with. One is that Joe said Ali Foley looks suspicious. You see that on the screen right now. You know what? I'm not going to lie. I have wondered
Oh
about that
yeah,
KO.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I wonder, but like the way he laid out seems like it's a little bit movie-ish, but those were
Yeah,
clean right hands as well. They were
yeah,
clean.
true.
Wasn't Zora Foley also his sparring partner at some point?
I'm sure they've done some rounds at some point. Yeah, But he also says that Tim Witherspoon claims he took a dive against Bone Crusher in the rematch when he got stopped in the first round. He says he lost a tooth doing so. That's some acting job, Oscar worthy. For what it's worth, I believe Tim. Tim's my friend, and he told me he took a
Yeah,
dive, and I believe him.
yeah. Tim
Yeah.
told you he took a dive.
Yeah, he told me many times, and I think he spoke about it openly in various platforms. I think it's in his book. He's got an autobiography
Yeah.
called "Terrible Times," and I
Well,
think
it certainly doesn't make sense to me that he would lose to Bone Crusher like
he
that.
won the first fight easy enough, right, Tim?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that doesn't, but I mean, bone crusher, getting caught cold is getting caught cold, and it can happen to anybody. I think I'd have to like look at that fight again. I haven't seen it in so long, but I know I was absolutely shocked when
It's
it
a very
happened.
believable job of taking a dive. He takes three dives for a start. He gets knocked down three times. So, if he took a
Yeah.
dive, he took three of them. Which,
Yeah, he's like, yeah, he's giving the person more than their money's worth. I would just stay down after the first one.
I mean, I think what he said he wanted gone from Don King. He wanted to sever that relationship. He
Uh,
wanted out. He'd had enough. He'd had the ambition and the hunger sucked out of him by all the
mhm,
the, the bullshit of the business,
yeah.
particularly Don King's peculiar brand of charm and
Mhm,
entrepreneurial maneuvers.
mhm,
And he said, just fuck it. I'm just going to go in there with that kind of kamikaze attitude. And he got
yeah.
blitzed. I can believe that. I think he got hit for real with a bunch of shots, but I think
Interesting.
perhaps he pressed the
Yeah.
self destruct button.
Interesting story enough. I remember my only dealing with Don King is when I just entered the no, I was number one contender at that time, middleweight division, and the titles were vacant. Sugar Ray had defeated Hagler, and the titles were vacant. And they were divvying them up. Who's going to fight who for what title? And the first one I was offered was Juan Roldan
Yeah.
in Argentina, and so it was me and Rodan. Don King was the promoter, and so he presented us the contract and everything. And I like my chances against Juan Rodan, absolutely.
Oh,
And
I do.
yeah, and and so we're getting ready for it, and we signed the contract, the agreement. And then at one point when we got the contract back to Don, and then he signed it, and then we got our contract back, and something had changed. Something had been changed in the script. I don't know what it was, but anyway, we ended up, that contract went, that opportunity went down the tube. I ended up fighting Tate and everything, but Juan Rodan, the fight didn't happen, obviously. Don King changed the contract. He struck something out and wrote it in afterwards. And my lawyer was like, "You can't sign this contract because he, you know what I mean, did some
Yeah,
things that were unscrupulous at the time and probably
yeah.
still unscrupulous."
As
But
was his want. It was just
yeah,
he's just a street
yeah.
guy, isn't he? He's
But
a
here's but
street
here's the
grifter.
thing. Here's the thing with Don though. At one time he will do something like that, but on the other side, you will see money with Don. Absolutely. Like he'll get
Yeah.
you the money. Like he'll make sure you're paid. He may take his cuts and all the rest of that kind of stuff, but you'll probably see more with Don than you'll see with any other
Well,
promoter.
that's what I think Slim Jim Robinson, who trained Tim Witherspoon, had said. He said,
Yeah.
in my day, if you got 10,000 for a main event, you're a lucky guy. He said, so if Don King made me 10 million and robbed me of a million, then
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
still
I'm
good with that.
ahead. Yeah,
You know.
exactly. Exactly. So sometimes it's just the fact that, it's just the fact that he's stealing from me and people focus on that instead of like, what's he also bringing to the table? He's bringing me more to the table than he's stealing or that I've ever had before. So
So
that's kind
yeah,
of,
yeah, and I think it'd be interesting to. Don King ain't going to be around much longer. It would be good to get an interview before he passes away. But Sid
yeah.
Vogel here has said Catterall versus Taylor won, biggest fight fix of recent years. I say no, not at all, because to me that's a bad decision. That's a controversial decision. It's a decision you don't agree with, Sid. That doesn't equate with a fix like what we're talking about. And I'm not
Yeah.
saying you could allege there's something disingenuous about it. Of course you can when there's a decision doesn't go. But that's not the biggest fight fix in recent years at all. No, that's a decision that most people didn't like. Simple as. You agree,
Hmm.
still? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I do. I remember, I barely, scarcely remember that fight, but I do remember feeling like, wow, he was
It's
got
just
a
one of
little
those
bit of a
things that.
gift. Yeah.
But do you remember? You will remember
Hmm.
this, I'm sure. 1993, Jesse Ferguson versus Ray Mercer. Mercer was getting the fight with Riddick Bowe next if he beat Ferguson, who was a
Hmm.
pretty decent contender.
Yeah.
And he was out of shape. He didn't have it that night, and he's supposed to have offered him 100 grand bribe in the middle of the fight. He said, "Listen, man, just go down. I'll give you 100 grand." He said, "Did you ever
Really?
hear that one?"
Wow.
And
I didn't hear that
it got investigated. He said he was like, "Man, I just don't got it tonight." They said he said, "Go
one.
down, go down. I'm good for it, bro. I'll give you 100 grand. I promise you. I swear down." And and Ferguson wasn't having it, and he just went on and won the fight over 10 rounds, and then he got the
Yeah.
Riddick Bowe fight next time out. Well, but it was investigated by the commission, which was either New Jersey or New York. Well, I think it happened in New York. So
Yeah.
it was they couldn't prove it in the end, but it was a thing, and it was spoken about in the American boxing magazines of the day. That he basically offered him a bribe in the middle of the fight, which must be quite unusual.
Yeah. I mean, I don't even think, how do you even make sure you're going to get paid that money? Like, you know what I mean? So he could say that to him, and he could be saying it. I mean, it's all for nothing. Like at the end of the fight, he'd be like, he'd win. If he won the fight, he'd be like, "I'm not paying you." No,
Do you know what I mean?
that
How can you try? How
backfire.
can you rely on that? Plus the
Yeah, you
fact,
can't.
if you're going to get the Riddick Bowe fight instead, what the hell do you want 100 grand for?
Yeah, that's true.
Do you know?
That's true.
But
I don't know if Jesse was thinking that way, but that's complex thinking. I think in the middle of a fight, that's complex thinking. But you're
yeah,
absolutely right.
the bribe allegations got him a rematch, says Bruce Gas, boxing Jazz and more. Yeah, they did. I feel nostalgic for that '90s era too. As well as the fabulous '80s. There was
Yeah.
something pretty cool about that '90s era with some of the stuff that used to go on, and I don't think boxing would be as interesting, would it, Silk, if we didn't have this stuff? If it was just like tennis or
Yeah.
rugby,
Yeah.
I
Let,
don't think I would be into it.
let me tell you something. Last night I was on, YouTube on my TV and big
Yeah,
screen TV, and I'm flipping around and I'm looking and I see oh man, Jerry Quarry
yeah, and Joe Fraser.
and Ron Lau.
Oh,
Oh my God! I'm looking at these guys fight. Jerry Quarry, Ron Lau. It's an incredible fight. These are heavyweights, and they're fighting at the pace of like lightweights, middleweights, welterweights. You know what I mean? And I long for that time. the
Yeah.
skills that these guys were showing, like the way Corey would get over and rip that body shot, and he rip it under the arm and come back on top, and that's just so missed in this day and age.
Fighting
But
like middleweights do, like good light
yo, I'm
middleweights fight.
telling you, a right uppercut followed by a left hook and then a straight right hand. It's like complex combinations by
Yeah.
both fighters. Like even I remember when I initially looked at him and I was like, he didn't strike me as that much, like had that kind of fistic eloquence. You know what I mean? But then when when I look at it today, I'm just like, wow, this is incredible what these guys were able to do. And the heavyweights, post, I mean, I guess from the
Post Lennox Lewis.
Klitschko era on, yeah, you know what I mean, late Lennox Lewis on, it just wasn't, it just isn't that, and now it's coming back to a little bit with
Yeah,
with
we're
what
getting a
with
little
what
swing because you've got
yeah.
your man on the throne.
And so,
The undisputed
yeah,
heavyweight champion
Usyk,
of the world.
yeah, exactly. So you have Usyk there. So what's going to happen is people are going to look at his game, and this is what he does, and this is how he fights, and this is what we have to do in order to beat him. So you have to show better skills than what the champion's doing. You can't come in with the same old primitive, throwing rocks and chucking spears
Do you
and
know
stuff like that. This
that
guy,
that George Foreman Joe Roman clip you sent me
yeah,
recently
uh-huh.
just reminded me how kind of feral Foreman was. There was something about that video you had. I don't know what it was. It was a bit like this was shot from the ring apron,
Yeah,
and it
yeah,
felt like you were in the ring and he was going to hit you if you weren't
yeah,
careful. You
yeah,
actually
yeah,
watched it. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah, absolutely.
I don't know where you found that video, but there was something different about it. Like it really was a worm's eye view of this carnage, and
Yeah,
it
yeah.
was like my God, George was like a train that had come off the tracks, wasn't he? It was.
Yeah, he really was. And I mean, think of it, right? It was such a short trip to the Olympics for him, from starting boxing to the Olympics, and then from the Olympics to becoming, top contender in the world and becoming world champion. Like, is that the shortest ever? Like going from beginning boxing, Olympic gold medal, and then world champion as a heavyweight world champion, not even heavyweight, any weight world champion. Like
Well, yeah,
from
but
start
he
to day.
didn't
What's
win the
this?
title till
Do you,
'74, did he? January '74.
yeah, off of Joe Frazier. But when did
Yeah.
he win the
It,
Olympics? Right?
oh, sorry, '73. It was '73, and then
Okay,
the
73.
the
It was
Fraser Ali
68
rematch.
Olympics. Was
Yeah,
it the
exactly.
68 Olympics
Yeah, so there's
that
still
he
five
won?
years there.
So there's 5 years. Okay.
Whereas,
But no, but look at it. What I'm saying is, I think he's probably from beginning boxing to winning the world title, going from the Olympics and then from beginner to Olympics to world title. I don't know if anyone's ever done that sooner.
Joe Louis first amateur fight in 1934, I believe, and was world heavyweight champion as a pro by 1937.
37,
Yeah,
but
it was
he didn't
crazy.
win. He didn't fight in the Olympics either.
He didn't. So you've got that, but it's still pretty incredible, though, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. That's incredible. So from amateur to pro, he fought. How many amateur fights did he have?
It was something like about 20 or something, 20 or 30.
Wow,
I need to check
wow,
that out.
that's incredible.
Let me check that out because
Yeah,
just to make sure, because I remember marveling at the fact that Joe Louis had only started. I think the people say his first amateur fight was 1934, and he was already, like I say, he'd already risen by June. I think it was June the 22nd,
hmm
1937.
yeah,
That was when it was. That
wow,
he won the title off Braddock in Chicago at
yeah,
Comiskey
yeah.
Park. So
Okay.
Larry Holmes has 5 years. This is where the boxing knowledge on here is incomparable. I need to check that because I better not be wrong. I will check it after we get off the show. But I do remember thinking because I read his autobiography again in the last few years. And I was like, that's incredible. Didn't really start boxing until 34. Because I
Yeah,
know he was already, his pro debut was 34 as well. So I think he may have turned pro so quickly that he didn't even do but a year in the amateurs.
wow, that's incredible.
So yeah.
That really is.
Because
That
he lost
really
to a
is.
guy called Max Marek in the finals of the National Golden Gloves. I know that. They said Joe Louis got put down 7 times in his first amateur fight. He lost and got put down 7 times.
He got dropped 7 times in that one match.
Yes, yeah, in his first amateur fight, according to legend anyway.
These days,
And
you get dropped once in the amateurs and they're throwing it in.
Do you know what I mean? They wouldn't have that today, would they? You know what I mean? But
7 times.
having
Oh my
said that, you
God.
know what, Silk, as well, this is another interesting talking point. I saw an amateur fight, London Championship level, maybe 12 years ago, maybe a bit longer,
Yeah.
maybe 15 years ago.
Yeah.
One guy got knocked down 3 times and won the fight. He didn't knock the opponent down at all,
Yeah.
but he got
Yeah.
put down 3 times and still won the fight on points.
Well, that makes sense, given what they say about boxing. It's like when you get hit, it counts as 1 point, even if you get knocked down.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
one
yeah, yeah,
point,
yeah.
and so that's kind of the way it's supposed to be. Um, yeah. So
So
you're obviously searching up the point, the Joe Louis point, right?
yeah, I am because
I know.
1934. They've got about 27 amateur fights from listed on BoxRec, right?
Uh-huh.
I'm
Amateur
just gonna.
fights. What about Wikipedia? Wouldn't they have a more thorough, no,
Nah,
on his
forget
amateur
Wikipedia. Come on, man. Anyone can edit that shit.
on his amateur background, though? Someone must have something.
Mm, sorry, 1933.
Okay. 1933 started.
1933. Yeah, he is his first amateur fight listed, and then so it took him 4 years to become. Yeah, 4 years to become world heavyweight champion from starting in 1933. Sorry for that slight error,
No,
but
it's all right. Yeah, that's forgivable.
it's still I'm still in the right direction in terms of the point I was trying to make. Um, BoxRec's amateur records aren't great. You're right, Sean, but they have what they have, and they're getting increasingly well stocked now, and they're building those databases as they go. They're not bad at all now. They've actually got career long amateurs who never turn pro, which I think is a good thing. When if somebody did enough of a if somebody made enough of a
Yeah,
dent in the unpaid
yeah,
code, they do have
yeah.
that. But it was. But you know, what were we saying? We were talking about Foreman and how prodigious his rise was, and it was. I think it makes Joe Lewis's thing even more impressive was it was in that era when you didn't get fast tracked or you weren't supposed to. He actually
Hmm.
was relatively fast tracked because he was a
Yeah,
big hot property, which
yeah.
nobody saw that coming at first because they didn't think any
Hmm.
black fighter was
Hmm.
going to be a hot property.
Yeah,
Sorry, what's his name? Jack Blackburn initially said, "I don't give a shit how good he is. Just go find me a white boy so I can make some money." And
yeah,
that's what he said at first
yeah.
when they
Well,
brought him to him.
I
You
mean
know,
that absolutely makes sense, right? I mean, it's always made sense, especially in the heavyweight division. If you get a, I mean, it's always been about the white hope since
yeah, and yet
1800.
there doesn't seem to have been a great white American fighter for 50 odd years now, or maybe even longer. They don't
Yeah,
seem to have any Caucasian American leading fighter. Kelly Pavlik is probably the last one I can think of, and before that, I think of Ray Mancini, or you think of guys like Greg
mhm,
Organ. But when
yeah,
you think of all time greats, you've got to go back as far as Marciano and Lamotte, right?
yeah,
You know.
yeah. eh, Yeah, I mean, I've seen again, quoting like if I think of Jerry Corey, I see guys with like great talent that came along at the wrong time. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
But and, it is what it is. Like if Jerry Corey was 10, 20 years earlier, you know what I mean, or 40 years later. But I know that's asking a lot. I really like. I look at him and I like his ability. Unfortunately, he was mismanaged. Comes along at the most difficult time you can come along, um, and and he didn't have the defensive attributes. So his
and
father was a teacher at that time.
if
Hmm.
they're doing four versions of the World Heavyweight Championship, then there's no problem he'd have
Yeah,
won one of them. I'm sure. I'm
he'd
sure he'd have won
definitely
one of
be
them.
champ. Absolutely, without a
But
doubt.
but we've gotten used to it now to the point where we completely sign off on that. Well, most people do anyway
Hmm.
because it's become normalised. Whereas obviously in his era it wasn't an option. And when people threatened to when the sanctioning bodies threatened to splinter things, the public really gave it a thumbs down and derided it.
Hmm.
Like nobody believed Ernie Terrell was heavyweight champion just because he beat Eddie Machin.
Oh
Whereas
yeah.
now that would have complete legitimacy. But just simply remember Lee Savold. Lee Savold in
Oh yeah.
1950, they called him the world champion. And the British Boxing Board of Control, for some strange reason, actually recognised him instead of Ezra Charles for a while. And then
Wow.
when Joe Lewis beat him, they recognised Lewis. They thought Lewis had became the first man to regain the championship as far as the British board was concerned. And then when he got annihilated by up and coming Rocky Marciano, they changed their mind and said, "Okay, that was a bad stance that we took there. So let's just forget that." Charles is
Yeah.
the man, actually.
Yeah.
But
Jumping back to what we're to with the mafia's influx in boxing.
Yeah.
How did Cus D'Amato actually, how was he able to operate around those guys? Like
Do you know what?
he's
Because it's interesting, and this kind of feeds in. I'm just going to acknowledge. Sid Bogle said, "Could we do a career review of Mike Tyson, both amateur and pro?" The answer, short answer, is yes. We could do something like that. But anyway, Silk, since you asked that, there was this guy called Jim Norris, right?
hmm
Who was the czar of something called the International Boxing Club, the IBC, and he
uh-huh.
was the one who was calling all the shots in league with some of those mafioso guys that I've already mentioned, like Carbo and Palermo. Okay, and then there was another rival organization that banded together people who were kind of a renegade body of people against that kind of movement called the Boxing Managers Guild, and Customato was a part of the Boxing Managers Guild who were kind of standing against Jim Norris and the IBC, and
hmm
with doggedness and a little bit of luck. D'Amato's end actually broke up that cartel, and because he had Patterson, that was the big thing. Because he had Floyd Patterson and he had independence and wouldn't let them get the claws into Floyd, that
Yeah.
was how essentially Customato managed to break the power base of the International Boxing Club and Jim Norris.
Mm. Mm. Okay, I get it. I get it. Huh.
And he was apparently paranoid because he was always thinking about being poisoned. He'd only eat in restaurants
Sure.
that he knew and trusted.
Yeah.
He'd always sit by the window. He used to sit, he was that guy who said, "I don't need luxury. It just makes a man more afraid of dying." He'd sleep in the gym. He'd sit near the window, and he was a little guarded about anybody coming to remonstrate with him. Because Ray Arcel was out of boxing for years, and I mean over 10 years, because he got done by gangsters with a lead pipe one night because they wouldn't. They were trying to strong arm him and get him to get a certain fighter to come over
Yeah.
to them, and Arcel tried to stand up for them, and he ended up getting done with a lead pipe in a dark alley one night, and he didn't
Wow.
really return until he came back on board with Roberto Duran because he'd been out a long time after a
Yeah.
beating.
So he got like things broken and he got hit on the head. Obviously, he
Yeah,
got
Ray
the
Arcel
whole thing.
took a major time out of at least 10 years from training fighters because the mob nobbled him.
Now, obviously, he recuperated earlier, but it must have been the
He said, "Who
intimidation
needs the
or
aggravation?"
yeah,
It took
exactly.
another era and the offer of working with Duran to get him
Well,
back on board.
what did he do in the interim? Do you know?
That will be interesting, and there is an autobiography of Ray Arcel, which maybe we should get it and have a look at that. I did, you know what? I did have it on Kindle one time. I can't remember if it was the sample or it was the whole book, but I haven't. I don't. The short answer is I don't know, but I did read in Bud Schulberg's book. It's another book on this shelf. I've got a lot of boxing books on this shelf. There's a Schulberg one here somewhere,
Uh-huh.
and that one I think describes what happened to Ray Arcel. I'm looking at it to see if I can just produce it now, but if I do that, I'm turning away from the screen. It's not professional, but unless I see it very quickly. But yeah, Bud Schulberg anthology called Ringside is very interesting reading too. Because you know what's interesting, he thinks Robinson's okay, but he ain't no Henry Armstrong or basically, and he thinks Duran was great, but he ain't no Benny Leonard and all that. It is interesting to get the
hmm
different era biases of people when you go
Yeah.
a really long time ago, because so
Yeah.
many things now pass into. Do you know, I get bored on Facebook still because most people want
Yeah.
to say the same thing all the time.
Yeah.
Never you,
Yeah.
by the
It's
way.
always the same ones. Yeah.
It's always like
Well.
most people, they think Marvin Hagler, best middleweight of all time for me.
Yeah.
Like they
Yeah.
say for me
Yeah.
as if no one else ever thought about. Larry Holmes, best jab ever, most underrated for me. For me.
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah.
Ray Robinson, greatest ever, the GOAT, the GOAT.
Yeah.
Now, all
Yeah.
right, we don't have to get
Yeah.
into that again.
Yeah.
But
We need
but
to hear
most
something
people just
different.
want to regurgitate all these cliches. And I
Yeah.
think to be having any value at all, we've got to bring something
Mhm.
different to the table. Whether
Yeah.
it's the way we box when we
hmm
used to box, or whether it's the way we
Yes.
cover
Yep.
boxing, the way we
Yep.
do our podcast. Sometimes we get on each other's nerves with the arguments and going back and forth, but we have
Well,
we
no,
have
you
a
don't
different
get on my
approach.
nerves. You don't get
No,
on my nerves.
have you noticed how chilled this is? I think there's something about the three of us together that gets people wound up and gets people arguing because we're always fine when there's two of us. Have you noticed that?
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
something about the dynamic of Sugar, Silk, and Stretch which creates a bit of a kind of explosion. I don't know what it is.
Well, chemicals. It's the chemicals. We all have this, but that's interesting. Sugar Ray and Armstrong, they fought one another too, right?
They did, but Armstrong is thought to have been over the hill.
Okay, and
Yeah,
Ray, they went the distance, didn't they?
yeah, 10 rounds, 10 rounds.
Yeah, and Sugar
Yeah.
Ray didn't really take it to him. Like he just
No, and you know, sometimes people don't against legends, do they? Some people think Hagler
Yeah.
with Duran even he had it something in his head of like, you know, there's a certain mark of respect to this man.
No,
Let's box.
he almost gave that fight away. I'm like, oh my god.
Do you know what I mean? It's
Like strategically, Hegler would do that. I think psychologically, he would, he did it in the Vito Antuofermo fight. He'd done it in fights that he had lost earlier. Like he just wouldn't apply himself in certain things because he had like a mindset, uh, the way he was going to do it, and he didn't adapt during the fight. Like he said, okay, I'm going to fight this guy like this, but he wouldn't let his natural thing come out unless I think he something threatened him or really agitated him. Then he was in. He was like he was with
yeah.
Hearns and like he was with K
It,
Man Lee
it
and
was his
different type.
cautious nature, you
Yeah,
know. Hagler
yeah,
had a cautious nature to an extent, you know,
exactly. Yes, yeah, yeah.
and
That's what I
and you know
think.
exactly. So
And
go on.
go ahead.
My
No,
my
and that's
dad
it.
said. Go on.
No, you go.
My dad
What?
said before that fight happened, he said, all I can see here is obviously there's going to be a big payday. He said, but other than that, Hagler's on a hide into nothing because he just stands to be knocked or whatever happens. He said, because
Mm-hmm,
Duran will be seen as this overstuffed lightweight who's,
mm-hmm,
you know, again, a little older. And he said, Hagler stands to be knocked off the back of this fight, you know, and people did knock
mm-hmm.
him to a degree. They called
Yeah.
him Marginal Marv and things like that afterwards, the
Uh-huh.
press headlines.
Yeah.
But you know what Michael
Think,
Katz said? Michael Katz
okay.
said it's not in Hagler's nature, like you just said, to overreact to a minor threat. And he
Mm-hmm.
actually said, which Duran fans won't like, and it might not be true, but he said he was too superior to Duran in context to actually need to dig deep and
Mm,
go the extra mile the way he saw
yeah.
it. But
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I saw that as, I mean, it was surprising to me. To me, I thought, as a fighter, as a contender at that time period, I just thought it was a red flag. You know what I mean? Like psychologically, something is happening with Hagler that isn't, it wasn't normal.
yeah,
Like what he did with Antifermo the first fight compared to what he did with him the second fight, and compared to what he did with Alan Minter, like right off the bat, like he let his hands go and he did certain types of fighters. He had more open confidence when he was fighting than
do you
others,
know someone
and
today,
especially when he fought them in a rematch. If he fought, like I think if he would have fought Ray in
Hamshaw,
a rematch, yeah,
Hamshaw,
yeah, and Antifermo and a ton of other guys. If he
Willie
fought him in
Monroe.
Fulio Bell, did he fight him twice?
Yes, and he and he
Yeah,
and he always did a better job on him. Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
he did. Yeah,
yeah,
you know, and
and
also Bobby Watts.
Blue Watch, absolutely. You know what I mean? Any of those early
Do you
losses
know what
or
someone said to me
draws.
today? They said if Minter hadn't have got cut in the first minute in the first round, he'd have gone the distance and given Hagler problems. And I said, nah.
No,
I said, there's cut stoppages and then there's an
yeah,
absolute slaughter. I
yeah,
said
yeah.
that, and that was the latter. I said that Minter was no way going 15 rounds with Hagler, but he was trying to
Oh
argue this
man,
case with me.
I remember watching that fight live, and I remember it was one of the most violent fights. Like I don't know, they were just fists, but he almost could have been kicking him in the head. I remember when he
I've never
threw,
seen such a mugging, you know,
yeah,
on a public stage. And you know
yeah,
what? I've
of
never seen a
fighters of that level too. Like like when Hegler came, he threw this sweeping right hook and hit him, and
three of
Minter's
them.
head goes back and comes back like this, and then he hits him, and it snaps back again. I was just like, this is whiplash.
And
This is
Minter's
crazy.
reaction, as good a fighter as he was, a fine fighter Alan was, who won everything,
Hmm.
his reaction looked like an ordinary man who'd been lamped by a professional
Yeah,
who suddenly felt
yeah,
the shock, like it had all suddenly got real. I've
yeah,
never seen
yeah,
a world class professional fighter react more like a Joe Public to getting hit with
yeah.
with an anvil.
Yes,
You know,
yeah.
it was bizarre, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. It was absolutely bizarre. He had no answer for it and couldn't. And it was only going to get worse. That was not
Yeah.
going to get better. There's no turnaround on that. What did end up getting stopped on cuts?
Cuts, but he was getting battered. He was
Yeah,
getting
yeah,
battered. You know,
yeah.
I
It
mean,
was yeah, yeah. We know the
and then
story
you know what
after that.
happened afterwards, don't you?
Oh yeah, I was just about to say the whole actor was getting pelted with. I guess that's the reason why they stopped selling bottles of
Do you
liquor
know
and
what? isn't it funny how different eras are? They actually had given them glass bottles, which any security firm worth their salt today would see that as absolute lunacy.
Yeah,
But back
yeah, yeah,
then, not only was there not a sequestered area where you had to keep your drinks like there is
yeah,
today in
yeah,
UK venues
yeah.
across the country, back
Hmm.
then, not only could you have your drinks with you on your lap as you're in the stands, they were glass bottles that you could obviously throw
You
at the
could
black
launch,
man
yeah.
if you were displeased by his victory. And
Hey, listen, I still remember a bottle going across the screen, and I remember the liquid coming out like it was propulsed by this liquid coming out of it. It's still so visible in my mind. And then and I remember them all like turtle shelling Hagler, and I couldn't believe it. I was just like,
Yeah,
wow,
the
this is
Petronelli and the
crazy.
police. It wasn't a security firm back then. It was the police. There was all these British
Yeah,
bobbies that were
the
escorting Marvin
Bobbies.
out. And then you
Yeah.
see him in the dressing room with that funny kind of Christmas party hat on, the gold crown. Did you see
Oh,
that? The
I didn't
interview
see it. I
afterwards.
never saw that.
Oh,
Yeah.
you've got to see that, man. I'll get it for you. But there's
All right.
Hagler. They had to interview him in the dressing room, and he's got what looks like a hat, like a gold king's hat that you get out of a Christmas cracker or something.
Oh no,
And he's
wait,
all
the
happy.
ones you pull apart, the old crackers.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It looks. He's got this cardboard gold crown on.
Paper, yeah.
And
That's
then they
funny.
said, "So, how did you feel about that, Marvin?" And he said, "Oh, it just lets me know how famous I am." And he
Yeah,
was all smiles once he got to the safety of the dressing
of
room.
course. Yeah, yeah. He was okay at that point.
And,
I
and
remember.
Minter said he didn't even know what happened because they interviewed Minter and he's clutching this towel to his eye and he's
Yeah,
obviously going to have to go to hospital imminently. And he's just
yeah,
talking through the towel. And then
yeah,
Carpenter says, "What about those ugly scenes, Alan?" He goes, "I don't know." He says, "Why? What did they do?" He hadn't seen anything.
yeah. But he was more or less the he stoked those flames though, didn't he? With what he was
Supposedly,
doing
Silk,
earlier. Yeah.
supposedly he said, "I will never lose my title to a black man." Supposedly.
What's that? Bernard Hopkins,
Yeah, it's that kind of thing. Come and here's the
wow.
thing: whether he actually said it or not, I don't know. Because Leroy Nicholas, is on my page a lot, you'll recognise that name.
Yes, I know Leroy. Yeah.
He claims that he saw it on TV in a TV interview when he was a kid. And I said, "No, you know what an anorak I am?" I'm like, "No, you didn't. It was never on TV." But he swears it is. I said, "Find me that clip." Then it didn't happen. It was in the newspaper. He was quoted in the
I'd heard,
newspaper.
yeah, I'd heard about it myself, and I was in Canada at the time,
Yeah,
so I'd heard about it, but
he claims he didn't say, "I will never lose my title to a black man." He said, "What I actually said was, I will not lose my title to that black man,"
oh.
which, which is
Emphasis
so,
on that. Yeah, it
yeah,
could be another black man, but not that one.
yeah. You know what I mean? But it was a very
Wow.
different time. Silk. There's one thing I
Sure,
can say. It was a very
sure.
different time. That certain things were seen as acceptable then in
Hey,
Britain and
listen.
in America.
Here's one thing that always, you know what I mean. It's not even a matter of justice. It's just like things you do things and you say things and you're responsible for them as a fighter. Like Minter said that, and I'm sure I don't know how he felt afterwards. I'd never talked to him or seen him say anything afterwards. But you know, listen, Hopkins said it, and I think there was some regret in that.
Devin
You know what I
Haney
mean?
said it. Devin Haney said he wouldn't lose to a white boy, meaning Lomachenko.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
he got the
He's
decision, but
yeah, he still won it though. And Garcia doesn't count as white officially, I guess.
no, I don't see Latinos as white either. To me, white's like me. That's what you. I'm
Yes.
not being. I'm not talking about like white pride or pureness of the white
No,
race or
hey,
nothing like
listen,
that.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But
No, no,
I
I
don't
know
see
exactly
when
what it
when
is.
when
Yeah,
you talk about greatest white fighters and people say De La Hoya, I'm like, come on, no, that's
yeah.
a Chicano.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
it's a little bit different altogether. But I mean, we'd have to just
Willie Pep is white.
Willie Pep, absolutely, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
this is always when we get into choppy waters. You have to be really careful around this part right here.
we don't really have to be that careful at all yet. It's
No,
because we've got
no.
we've got a dedicated small underground fan base. Soon as we get bigger to the point where we can say something controversial that ruffles feathers, then we'll start having more problems because especially when Gary is on and is in
Mm-hmm.
full flow. Because so
More
far
money,
we've
more
had a few
problem.
moments that if Steve Bunce had said it or someone like that, then
Hmm.
there would have been an issue. But because we've got an audience, but we don't have a big enough audience to create any scandal yet. We don't,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know.
and I think both, well, speaking for us, that we tend to speak level-headed about things, and we don't come
Yeah.
out as accusatory, and we don't call, we let a person's character or what they say
Yeah.
prove themselves, and don't look to put anything on people that we
No,
don't
and
know for
anybody
sure,
who
100%.
anybody who tried to accuse me of racism, it would be hilarious. I mean, I
Yeah,
actually did
that
have
would
that
be.
once. Someone accused me once, because I do get these trolls and people are against me. Like when
Hmm.
Gary says he gets these messages of people saying, "I'll knock him out if that spar ever happens," all this. But I was in a music video once, and we had to be blacked up for it. Not because we were supposed to be black, but because didn't want to see our faces. We were monks, okay, and they just wanted us to be dark, ghoulish figures with hoods on. So we were
Hmm.
blacked up so you couldn't see us. And I took a few pictures, backstage. I've got the hood down. I'm reading Don
Yeah,
King's autobiography, funnily enough,
yeah, yeah,
and I've got
yeah,
the black makeup on. And
yeah.
somebody tried to send it to Spencer saying, this guy's supposed to be your friend. I wonder how you feel about this picture. And Spencer sent it to me saying, "What's this all about?" And I said, "It was a fucking music video for some
Yeah,
naff
yeah,
Welsh opera
yeah,
singer. Why? You
yeah,
know."
yeah.
But, but you do get them, Silk. You do get them
Yeah. Hey, listen, people can make a mountain out of a molehill.
for sure.
You know
But so I think, well, we've been on 90 minutes. We're closing on 90 minutes. I guess that's
what?
probably a wrap.
Time flies.
Yeah, Well, I'm glad that you made a success of this because you stuck with it. You were having trouble with the audio there. I hope that doesn't happen again.
Yeah,
But who
yeah.
cares?
No,
At
no.
the end of the day, we got
I
there in
had
the end.
to,
Silk.
I had to borrow my wife's ear pods, so it makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, that's definitely worked well. Okay, well, next week, sorry, you've got the Bam Rodriguez Juan Francisco Estrada fight, big flyweight fight
And that's
happening.
that's not that's not a fight that we're gonna bet on.
I think we should. I mean,
You think we
Bam is
should?
pretty big. Yeah, but
Okay,
Estrada and Bam are pretty big names. Why not?
okay.
You know,
And what's the deal right now? What percentage am I?
you're 70%, Gary is 66, and I'm 56%. So
Okay,
because
okay, we're
the
moving
numbers
up.
are getting confusing now, aren't they? Because now
Yeah,
we've all got a few losses now
yeah,
and a different
yeah,
amount of wins. The
yeah,
percentages make more sense now. But you
yeah. They
you
do.
you got right ahead with the reversal of the Ryan Garcia Devin
Hmm.
Haney fight. You got right ahead off the back of that.
Yeah.
That made a big difference.
Listen, 70%. Can you imagine hitting 7 to 10? 7 out of 10. Those are like unheard of odds. Anybody who wants to like actually bet on fights, they should come see me.
Yeah, well, I was going to propose we actually make the slightly change the scale. I'll run it by you because Gary thought it was a good idea. Where we actually say you can play safe and just bet the right winner, well, a bit like at the betting shop, and you only get 1 point. But if you do predict the method of victory, like stoppage or points, you get 2 points, and if you call a draw, you get 3 points. We could
Uh,
build this a little bit. I don't mean in any silly,
uh,
disingenuous way,
yeah,
like the one
yeah,
you vetoed. You know what I mean? I'm talking
yeah, yeah,
about
yeah.
if you suppose you want to
You
pick,
you're
for
talking
instance.
no, you're talking about the one like when I called the Fury and Ganu fight, and I said that
Well,
I
yeah,
like
but you
which is
wouldn't
I don't
get
know.
points. You wouldn't get
Well,
points for calling a knockdown, though.
I said that he was
I know
gonna
what you
call. I
said,
said he was gonna knock down Fury,
but
and I said,
lose.
but Fury would still win the decision. I mean, I
That
don't know if
makes
there's
you.
ever been
But
any more
listen,
accurate. I don't know
let's
if there's anyone
simplify
been
it.
some more accurate on a
But
call
you
than
wouldn't get
that.
extra points for being, Nostradamusly accurate like that. You get the extra point for saying it's gonna be Fury on points. It just makes you look super good that you say he will get knocked down, but he'll win a decision. That just makes you look brilliant.
I mean, how many people said that? I don't know of anybody in the world that said anything like that. Do you?
Um, you were the one that I'm aware of who said it. It was a good call. You said that Tyson is training him to score a knockdown, and he'll get one, but he won't win the fight. So what?
Yeah.
And I think you're those who said that it was a robbery and Ngannou won. I don't believe it. I think you called it
Hmm.
right. Fury won,
Hmm.
but he got
Hmm.
decked and he looked terrible.
Yeah, yeah.
And plus the fact you called it Usyk fight right too. So I could talk all day about the fact that that span on the flip of a coin, that fight after the seventh round, it doesn't make a difference. You
Hmm.
called it. I was hesitant, as you know. Gary said you are going to get the shock of your life. He's going to batter Usyk. He's going to embarrass Usyk.
Did
So
that sway you? Did that sway you?
no, it didn't sway me at all. I said I'm not at all as confident as that. I said I'm kind of feeling people who talk up Usyk's prospects. I understood it, and I was like, you know what, he can win this fight. I wasn't saying it was going to be an annihilation like Gary was, but I just fancied Fury to do it. And for 7 rounds, I thought I got it right. I still don't know if
Wow.
I'm going to pick Fury in the rematch or not. I need to think about it.
Yeah, I wouldn't if I were you.
No, but then I'll go with you, and then we'll lose somehow. That's the way my luck seems to work out.
Yeah, stay on Gary's team.
Because it's a bit like the other day when I said to you, we had the same three fighters picked, and you were like, "Oh my god,
Yeah.
a red flag."
Yeah.
Well, we live to
All
fight
right.
another day, my friend.
We do.
We live
We
to
do.
fight
We
another
do.
day.
Yes, sir.
Guys, thanks for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this episode. We'll be back next week, Friday night, 9 p.m. UK time, 4 p.m. EST. Spread the word, share, like. You know the drill.
Ciao.
Peace out.